So I always find the Nintendo Investors Q&A sessions very fascinating because it actually allows people to ask Nintendo questions. Nintendo seems to be a very secretive company when it comes to talking about anything. I mean, you don't really see all these interviews constantly happening like you see with heads of other companies. It seems like every week Jim Ryan and Phil Spencer are talking about stuff, and then there's Nintendo, who really only answers questions during these Q&A sessions. Sure, you might get the offhand interview with Doug Bowser of Nintendo of America, but what does Doug really do? I mean, Nintendo of America, at its core, is a marketing company. At its core is a translation company. They aren't making decisions about games and hardware and stuff like that. No, they're simply just relaying what Nintendo of Japan tells them to do in the biggest market for video games. That's a discussion for another day, whether or not Nintendo of America should have more power in the hierarchy. Spoiler alert, I think they should, because it's always good to have a Western influence on what you're doing, but, you know, maybe it's not needed at the end of the day. You look at things like sales figures for Nintendo Switch hardware and software, and people are always quick to point to those as a sign of quality. And I mean, yes, it is indicative of quality to at least some degree, but I mean, would you argue that some of the best-selling albums of all time are necessarily the best? You know, once again, that's a debate for another day. But during this Q&A session, a very interesting question was asked that I feel not only touches on the present, but potentially the future of Nintendo and the Nintendo Switch brand and what have you, whether they'll do, you know, a sequel to the system or whatnot. And I can't believe that I get it, you know, you don't want to dog your own stuff, but I can't believe they actually believe this. But I feel like a part of me does think that this is how they honestly feel, and this is honestly how they look at this situation with the Nintendo Switch and the future of stuff. Of course, I don't know, at the time of the filming of this video, people are saying that a Nintendo Switch 2 announcement is next week. Okay, good luck with that. Here's the question at hand, though. Here is the answers, and then I kind of want to explore this to see whether or not I believe it, and more importantly, whether or not you guys believe it. So the question was, I'd like to hear the honest opinions of the developers about whether the hardware specifications of Nintendo Switch, now in its 7th year, are sufficient to bring all of their game ideas to fruition. So obviously, they're talking about hardware limitations because of the specifications of this system. This technology is probably almost a decade old at this point in time. So are they realizing limitations within their own software? And I think we all know the answer to that, but here's the answer that they give. So Shinya Takahashi, who of course is a producer for many of Nintendo's bigger titles, you know, Pikmin 4, he was a producer on that. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, he was a producer on that. Go look at his history. I mean, there's a million things there. You always see him during Nintendo Direct presentations as well. He answered the following, and then Ko Shoyoda, who is a director and a senior executive officer of the hardware side of things, also answered this, but let's focus in on what Takahashi said at first. As a game software developer, if you ask me whether Nintendo Switch has sufficient performance, I would not say it's lacking. However, game developers generally want more, and will always want to incorporate a lot of elements that exceed the hardware limitations. Since the Famicom era, we have worked on how to fit these elements inside a framework with certain limitations, and our job is to figure out how to create a fun game within these constraints. I believe that some interesting content are created as a result of accommodating the limitations, and we've actually been able to make this happen. So that's pretty interesting to say, in my opinion, that it's not lacking. And I'm going to cover that a bit in a little bit, but let's talk about what Koei Shoyoda said as well, so we can sort of get a groundwork from both a software developer and a hardware developer. So Ko Shoyoda said, "We've been developing Nintendo Switch software for a long time and have used various methods to overcome performance barriers. Even now, the system developers are listening to game developers and are continuously implementing initiatives to increase the smoothness and longevity of Nintendo Switch hardware development." So there's a lot to unpack with this. And I feel like they honestly can't believe that. I mean, maybe they do to some extent, But people are quick to point out certain games that have come to the Nintendo Switch as proof that what Takahashi and Koei Shioda are saying is indeed true. They'll talk about games like Crysis, the Crysis trilogy. They'll talk about games like Alien Isolation, which does run a bit better than its other counterparts in certain areas of the game. You can't discount that, but those are kind of outliers to me. That's not across the board standard. When you look at third-party offerings on the Nintendo Switch, 9 times out of 10, the Switch version is going to be the inferior version. It'll be maybe half the frame rate, a lower resolution and stuff like that. And, you know, I get it. That's not the end of the world. And most of the time, I don't even necessarily mind it. But it is the worst, comparatively speaking, out of the other versions of the game. But what strikes me as odd here is that Takahashi and both Shioda say that they're overcoming performance barriers. Things aren't lacking. We're constantly using things to increase the smoothness and longevity. But when you look at first-party hardware, or software, I should say, there's clearly been problems with things like performance and with things like smoothness with these games. Look at a game like Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which Nintendo was very hands-on with. Look at games like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which feels like it's about to explode your Nintendo Switch. Look at The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Great game, but you can't say that that game doesn't have performance issues, because I mean it does. Whether or not those performance issues bother you, you know, that's a different subject. That's a different sort of topic. But to say that they don't exist is just a fallacy. You know what I'm saying? There is pop-up, which, you know, didn't bother me. There are frame rate dips, which also don't bother me. But to say that it's not lacking, that's concerning to me. I know we all want Nintendo to have a capable system, and we want them to have something, you know, there's people out there that want them to do like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series system. People thought that the Nintendo Switch was going to be the super powerful system, and when it wasn't, they got very upset by that. I'm not necessarily of that mindset. I just want something that has good frame rates and has good performance, and it doesn't feel like it's necessarily lacking comparative to the other versions of games when it's third-party stuff. And I don't feel like we're at a point right now in the 7th year of the Nintendo Switch where that's the case. The thing about the Switch, the thing that made the system so cool when it initially first came out, was the fact that it was super unique. There was nothing like it. It was the only home handheld available and the only home console that turns into a handheld, and vice versa. The whole, you know, Switch mechanic, the hybrid theory, was completely new at that time. Obviously, other companies have come around and put their own spin on it, but none of them have had any of the success that Nintendo has had with the Switch. However, these companies are offering third-party titles via Steam, and it's kind of strange to think that someone would choose a Switch version of a game over a Steam version of the game should they have both of these platforms, since the Steam version is obviously going to run better. Now, I'm not saying that I don't do that, because I do prefer Switch versions over Steam versions, because the Steam Deck's kind of clunky to me. You know, as far as the size is concerned, it's very ergonomic. The Switch is very ergonomic, but it's just an interesting thing to think about, because as time goes on, obviously the technology gap is going to grow, and we all assume that Nintendo is going to release new hardware in 2024 or 2025, or some people even think that it's this year, which, I mean, that's absolutely crazy. But if they have this mentality of putting restrictions on themselves because of the hardware that they choose, is that a good thing for the future of the system? Should they be looking at something more powerful that's still efficient in terms of battery life, that's still efficient in terms of a monetary value as well? Because you don't want to overprice things. You don't want to make things too expensive. I don't know. I don't know that I have the answer, because I feel like as a consumer, different people care about different things when it comes to video games. And while we all want games to look and run great, it bothers some people more so than others. I think I'm pretty moderate when it comes to how much it bothers me, unless it's just like thrust into my face in a constant sort of thing. But all consumers want different things when it comes to their hardware platform and when it comes to their games. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer with this. I don't know that this mentality is necessarily a bad thing for the general audience. For me, this is a little bit concerning. You know, when you're hitting the 7th year of a platform, you should be maxing this system out. Think of the transition of video games from the games that are first released on a system to when they're last released on the system, and how developers are able to get this additional power and figure out these additional tricks out of these systems as far as retro systems are concerned. Look at the first NES game to the last NES game. Look at the first, you know, SNES game to the last SNES game. And it feels like we're sort of losing that magic with a lot of these systems because developers are maximizing the power of these systems very early in the system's life cycle. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer with this, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about this, because this is, you know, a commentary discussion video. I really, you know, I've sprinkled my opinion in here. I've sprinkled my doubts about this statement in here, but I'm just one person and there's a whole legion of people out there. So let me know what you think of this in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching this video. I didn't feel like being on camera today. I had a couple adult beverages last night. I'm still a bit tired. I want to go back to sleep, but I wanted to have sort of a discussion with you guys today because I found the story very fascinating. And as always, if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Give me your thoughts. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.